Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Rouhani and these are the headlines. Pakistan's army says two of its soldiers have been martyred in unprovoked Indian fighting along the line of control. The military's media wing, ISPR, says soldiers Nurul Hassan and Wasim Ali were martyred in the latest Indian ceasefire violation in Deva sector. The military said Pakistani troops responded effectively, targeting the Indian posts that initiated the fire. Russian President Vladimir Putin's critic Alexei Navalny has been discharged from a Berlin hospital. He was being treated for Novichok nerve agent poisoning. His team alleges he was poisoned on the orders of Putin, but the Kremlin strongly denies any involvement in the incident. Alexander Lukashenko has been sworn in for a sixth term as the president of Belarus. State media says several hundred people have been invited to the ceremony in the Palace of Independence. The swearing-in comes at a time of mass unrest in Belarus, with tens of thousands of protesters demanding his resignation and fresh elections. In India, nearly 1,100 people have died and more than 83,000 tested positive with COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The country's death toll has climbed to over 90,000, with over 5.6 million people infected by the new coronavirus. In Pakistan, 8 more people have lost their lives to the virus, with the death toll standing at 6,432. The virus has claimed around 971,000 lives worldwide, while over 31.5 million have been infected. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. Pakistan's army says two of its soldiers have been martyred in unprovoked Indian fighting along the line of control. The military's media wing, ISPR, says soldiers Nurul Hassan and Wasim Ali were martyred in the latest Indian ceasefire violation in Deva sector. The military said Pakistani troops responded effectively, targeting the Indian posts that initiated fire. The Inter-Services Public Relations said Pakistan Army's retaliatory fire dealt substantial physical and material damages to the Indian side. It said there have been 2,333 ceasefire violations by Indian troops this year. Turkey says Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is still a burning issue, and the unilateral steps taken by New Delhi have complicated the problem. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan raised the Kashmir issue during his address to the United Nations General Assembly. Erdogan called for the resolution of the decades-old dispute in accordance with the aspirations of the Kashmiri people. President Erdogan said the solution of Kashmir issue is key to the stability and peace in South Asia. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has appreciated President Erdogan for raising his voice for Kashmiris. He said Turkey's unwavering support is a source of strength for the Kashmiris in their legitimate struggle for self-determination. Head of Afghanistan's High Council for National Reconciliation, Abdullah, says he will be visiting Pakistan in a few days. Addressing a virtual conference of the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations, Abdullah said all regional countries will benefit from this visit. Abdullah said the way forward is to cooperate and work together because a lot of opportunities have been missed in the past. He said there is a lot of mistrust between regional countries which needs to be sorted, and all grievances need to be resolved. Abdullah said no one expects a comprehensive deal to be signed with the Taliban within a few days. The U.S. Department of Defense says it is conducting prudent planning to withdraw all soldiers from Afghanistan by May 2021. At a congressional hearing on Washington's Afghanistan's policy, Assistant Secretary of Defense David Halvey said complete withdrawal is conditioned with the implementation of the U.S.-Taliban agreement. He said since the signing of the Doha Agreement, no U.S. military personnel have been killed in Afghanistan. Halvey said Defense Secretary Mark Esper has not yet ordered the reduction of the troops below 4,000 to 5,000 level. The U.S. has called on Yemen's Houthi rebels to stop launching attacks against Saudi Arabia. In a statement, U.S. State Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortagus said it is deeply concerned over Houthis' aggression. She said Houthis should immediately cease their cross-border attacks against Saudi Arabia's Marib city, where nearly 1 million Yemeni refugees live. The statement also called on Houthis to halt the disgraceful treatment of journalists and opposition activists. The statement comes after an increase in Houthi drone and missile attacks on Saudi Arabia in recent weeks. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has held an extraordinary conversation with Bahrain's Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa. In a tweet, Netanyahu said the two sides discussed the principle of the Abraham Accords in the telephone call. He said they talked about boosting cooperation in economy, technology, tourism, and efforts for regional peace. Netanyahu said they will soon be implementing things practically. The United States says it is committed to preserving Israel's qualitative military edge in the Middle East. U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said preserving Israel's military edge is the cornerstone of the U.S.-Israel defense relations. Speaking at the Pentagon before a meeting with Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz, Mark Esper said the U.S. administration and Department of Defense are committed to upholding the long-standing priority of maintaining Israel's military supremacy. These remarks came after Israel expressed concerns over a possible sale of U.S. F-35 fighter jets to the United Arab Emirates. Israel is currently the only operator of F-35 aircraft in the Middle East region. Israel's envoy, who physically participated in the UN General Assembly session, walked out of the hall during Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's address. Ambassador Gilad Erdan left as Erdogan slammed Israel's oppression, violence and intimidation towards Palestine. In his pre-recorded speech, Erdogan stressed Turkey will not support any plan that the Palestinians do not give consent to. Erdogan said the conflict can only be resolved with the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state. He said the state must be based on 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. The Turkish president said those declaring to open embassies in Jerusalem violate the UN resolutions and international law. He said normalization of some countries of the region serves Israel's efforts to erode basic international parameters. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says the U.S. has waged an economic war against Tehran by imposing curbs on the dollar and companies. Addressing the cabinet, Rouhani said Iran was under economic sanctions since 1980, but the economic war began in 2018. Earlier, Rouhani said Iran is not a bargaining chip in the U.S. elections and the domestic policy. The president said Washington can neither impose sanctions nor war on Tehran. Tensions between the two countries have escalated after the UN Security Council rejected a U.S. demand to extend the arms embargo. Russia's opposition politician Alexei Navalny has been discharged from the Sheriff Hospital in Berlin. Hospital officials say the patient's condition has improved sufficiently for him to be discharged from the acute inpatient care. Navalny, a fierce critic of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, was flown to Germany after falling ill. German chemical weapons experts say he was poisoned with the Soviet-era nerve agent Novichok. They said findings were corroborated by labs in France and Sweden. The Kremlin has denied any involvement in the case. Alexander Lukashenko has been sworn in for a sixth term as the president of Belarus. The swearing in comes at a time of mass unrest in Belarus, with tens of thousands of protesters demanding his resignation and fresh elections. State media says several hundred people have been invited to the ceremony in the Palace of Independence. It said the guests included senior officials, lawmakers, heads of the government bodies and the national media, among others. Lukashenko's security forces has already launched a brutal crackdown against the opposition and the protesters. Minsk faces the prospect of US and European Union sanctions over the disputed elections and human rights violation. Turkey and Greece have agreed to resume talks over their contested maritime claims in the eastern Mediterranean after a 4-year hiatus. Without giving a date, the Greek Foreign Ministry said the 61st round of exploratory talks in Istanbul will resume in the near future.
Dialogue between the two countries broke off in 2016 after 60 rounds, leading to recent flaring tensions. Turkish Cyprus President Mustafa Akinci has termed the development as extremely positive and gratifying. Earlier, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan held a video conference with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and European Council President Charles Michel. During the meeting, Erdogan called for a regional conference to gather all sides involved in the dispute, including the Turkish Cypriots. Erdogan also held a phone call with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron and assured Ankara is ready to solve all problems on the table.
The United Nations says the EU's approach towards migration and asylum is unworkable, untenable, and often carries devastating human consequences. In a joint statement, UN Refugee Agency and the International Organization for Migration called for a common and principled approach. The statement read, "Progress on fighting smuggling can be achieved with equal attention and resources." It said recent events across the Mediterranean, including delays in disembarking refugees, have further highlighted the need to reform the EU's management. It said the lack of EU-wide agreement on disembarkation is exacerbating human suffering. The organizations also extended concern for those who find themselves endangered along all migration routes. The statement read, "Saving lives must be the priority and should not be impeded or criminalized." Malaysia's opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim claims to have secured a strong majority to form a new government. Addressing a news conference, Anwar said his support from the lawmakers means the administration of Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has failed. He said he had been approached by a member of MPs from various parties who were unhappy with Yassin. Criticizing the present setup, the opposition leader said the government and its 70 ministers had spent too much time distributing positions and contracts. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has announced an economic package worth $2.41 billion to help industries and citizens hit by the pandemic. Yassin said the program includes over $1.6 billion in cash assistance for small businesses and a wage subsidy scheme. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has reiterated his country's support for a political settlement in Libya. In his address to the UN General Assembly, Sisi said Egypt is ready to help Libyans free their country of the terrorist organizations. Sisi said Egypt is committed to putting an end to the interference of some regional parties that deliberately transported foreign fighters to Libya. He said it is regrettable that the international community continues to turn a blind eye to states that provide support to terrorists in Libya. Sisi said the ramifications of the crisis are not only confined to Libya, but also spill over to affect security in neighboring countries. The president said Cairo declaration serves as a joint comprehensive political initiative to end the conflict in Libya. Angry protesters have set fire to the Guerrero State Congress in southern Mexico. The violence has appeared in Mexico as the 6th anniversary of a massacre of 43 student teachers approaches. Some 500 union members and students broke into the state legislature and set fire to the chamber and the library. They also torched 5 cars. Some riot police were also injured in the clashes. Protesters also set fire to the Guerrero State headquarters of the ruling Institutional Revolutionary Party. The kidnapping of the young men in 2014 remains one of the most infamous incidents during the 13 years of Mexico's drug war. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In India, nearly 1,100 people have died and more than 83,000 tested positive with COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The country's death toll has climbed to over 90,000 with over 5.6 million people infected by the new coronavirus. In the US, the death toll from coronavirus has surpassed 200,000 as the number of infections approaches 7 million. The virus has claimed around 968,000 lives worldwide, while almost 31.5 million have been infected. Pakistan has recorded 8 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The health ministry says 532 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry says the death toll has risen to 6,432, with the number of confirmed cases exceeding 307,000. It said nearly 294,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. The ministry said the number of active cases stands at 7,070. It said 107 patients across the country are on ventilators. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called for strengthening the World Health Organization to coordinate the global response to COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking at the UN General Assembly, President Vladimir Putin proposed holding a virtual conference for countries interested in the joint development of vaccines. He said all capacities of the global pharmaceutical industry are needed to be employed to provide free access to vaccination for all the states. Putin said Russia is ready to share its experience and to supply other countries with its Sputnik V vaccine. He also said Russia is offering to provide free of charge vaccine for the staff of the UN and its offices. Russia was the first country to grant regulatory approval for a novel coronavirus vaccine. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps has commissioned 188 new helicopters and unmanned aerial vehicles into its naval forces. In a ceremony, Navy Commander Rear Admiral Ali Raza Tangsiri said the new drones are able to take aerial photos of mobile and fixed targets during combat operations. Tangsiri said 3 vertical takeoff and landing drones have also been unveiled for the first time. He said an all-weather pilotless aircraft designed to carry simultaneously a payload of 4 missiles has also joined the fleet. Tangsiri said all Navy operations are now carried out with indigenously produced drones and aircraft. According to a statement shared by state media, 2 amphibious helicopters and 4 combat choppers armed with missiles have also been added. Saudi Arabia has announced it will gradually resume the Umrah pilgrimage from October after a 7-month pause due to the coronavirus. Saudi state media says the locals will be able to undertake the pilgrimage from October the 4th. It said in the first stage, 6,000 citizens and residents within the kingdom will be allowed. The media said pilgrims traveling from selected countries will be allowed from November the 1st. Visitors from outside the kingdom will be permitted after Umrah's capacity will be raised to 20,000 pilgrims per day. The death toll from the building collapse in India's southwestern Maharashtra state has climbed to 35. Officials say rescue work has been hampered by rain and a narrow entrance to the alley. The National Disaster Response Force said the victims include 8 children. It said at least 8 people are still missing and rescue personnel are clearing debris to look for them. The response force had said at least 20 people have been rescued so far as the operations enter 3rd day. Officials say they are investigating the cause of the collapse of the structure that housed 54 apartment buildings. Around 380 whales have died in the worst mass stranding in Australia's history. Tasmania Parks and Wildlife Service Manager Nick Decker says more than 450 longfin pilot whales have been stranded in the harbour. Nick Decker said rescuers are working to free as many of the animals as they can. He said it is not clear why the whales became become stranded. Rather, scientists have said the reason is often unknown, but they have a range of theories, including whales being lured by fish to shore and becoming disoriented. Rescuers say they have escorted 50 whales back into the sea. The United Nations says China is expected to register economic growth of 1.3% this year and of 8.1% in 2021. The Trade and Development Report says this is the highest economic growth rate in the world since COVID-19 pandemic. The report says the world economy is experiencing a deep recession amid a still unchecked pandemic. It says the world is grappling with the equivalent of a complete wipeout of the Brazilian, Indian, and Mexican economies. It said international trade will shrink by around 1/5 this year and the remittances will drop by over $100 billion. The UN report said the global economy will contract by an estimated 4.3% this year. It said up to 120 million people will be pushed into extreme poverty in the developing world, with close to 300 million facing food insecurity. European stocks have climbed as investors reacted to key data releases from the Eurozone. Tech shares were the strongest gainers in Europe following a rally overnight in Amazon, Microsoft and Apple. The pan-European stocks 600 has gained close to 1.5%, with travel and leisure stocks bouncing back. All sectors and major bourses are in positive territory. London's FTSE 100 has jumped over 2% to lead the gains. Frankfurt's DAX has so far added close to 1.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris too has advanced nearly 2%. Earlier Asian markets traded mixed, with mainland Chinese stocks, Australia's ASX 200 and South Korea's Kospi making gains. Hong Kong's Hang Seng and Japanese bourses declined. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.